All right, guys, let's talk about equivalence and learning paths. This was, we opened up a poll a while back, a long time ago, when, we had like a long list of deep dives that we were going to kind of address month after month. And equivalence was one of the things that people thought, I could use like a little refresher on equivalence. So that's what today's going to be about. Learning Path is a curated list of courses. It's like providing a journey for your user, for your learners, and a lot of our clients use these learning paths kind of as like required learning for their new hires. For example, it's like they need to do A, B, C, D, and E, and they must do them. And we try to provide an expiration date so that really kind of pushes the idea of a due date, that sort of thing. Equivalence, even though learning paths really do sort of present people with like a list of things that they're expected to do or that we're offering for them to do, what equivalence does is offer options. So that's what it's all about, is options. So there is a learning theory. Most of you know about this more than I do because you're in the learning development world, and I'm just kind of starting in the learning and development world. But Knowles's adult learning theory says that because they're capable, adults should be offered the option to direct their own learning. And that's all about self-direction. And we know that self-direction is kind of key in learning, instructional design, and in adult learning, even in childhood. I used to be a Montessori teacher, so I know very well how Dr. Maria Montessori kind of believed children should be observed in the classroom. And she believed that kids learn best when they're able to be free to move around. They're able to choose their own work. They're able to follow their own interests. And that's really the same for adults in theory. Research really does support that concept. It shows that learners who have control over their learning tend to be more successful in online learning environments. And the LMS fully supports that concept. We allow learners to come in, they search, they browse, they're able to kind of pick what they need. However, in the context of the learning path, that kind of is in opposition to that theory, right? I mean, the learning path, we're kind of presenting what we expect people to do. We're taking away that control in a lot of ways. Learning paths are necessary, and they're, in a lot of ways, they're a welcome tool, providing, that nice curated list of requirements. It's a nice convenience tool for learners to kind of provide it in a nice, clean little bow tie bucket, right? And it's a great tool for the organization to be able to track those requirements, to track the progress of somebody within that bucket. But in fact, we're kind of taking away that control. So what equivalence does is give back a little tidbit of control to the learner. That's the idea, to give your learner some options. The learning path equivalence tool that we've got for you guys is just a very, very basic tool. It doesn't have a lot of layers. It's just kind of on or off. Once it's on, it works globally on the path. So if you turn on equivalence on the path and you assign equivalence to a particular folder in the path, well, it's on. And equivalence means that one equivalence folder is going to be equal to another equivalence folder, which will be equal to the other. If you have 4 equivalence folders, they're all equal to each other. That's the way equivalence works. There's no layers, but it can be a handy tool. The basic premise of a standard learning path is that, let's say you have course 1, course 2, course 3. Let's assume all of those courses are required. You don't have to have them all required, but we're going to make some assumptions here that they're all required. The idea of a learning path is that when your user has completed all of these 3 required courses, 1, 2, and 3, the path will be marked complete, right? Complete path when they've completed 1, 2, and 3. That's the idea. So suppose the third course, for example, is this is a live event. It's a scheduled course, so it's going to be kind of a set of live events that are available for the users to pick based on this topic, right? It's going to be the first steps for new hires. Let's just assume that. Okay. Let's say that you want to give your learners an option to not have to attend the scheduled event. Maybe there's an alternative to the scheduled event. They could alternatively take a SCORM course. It's the same topic, and you're saying when you establish that equivalence that folder A equals folder B. They still have to complete 1, 2, and 3, but at the 3 level, they have 2 choices. They can complete 1 and 2, and then they have a choice to do either folder A or folder B. So let's add a layer of complexity to the concept here. So right here, we're seeing folder A and folder B equal each other. And that's kind of obvious, right? So that means that you're going to be marked as complete if you do 1 and 2 and the SCORM course, or you'll be marked as complete if you do 1 and 2 and the scheduled course. Either way, you're going to be marked as complete. But let's say that you add another layer, another idea. You can have additional folders that are considered equivalent. You can't have multiple equivalencies inside of a single path. It's equivalence and it's one equivalent. So what I mean by that is you could say, I've got 3 alternatives to the SCORM. A is the SCORM, and then B is the scheduled course, and C could be some other course that's also equivalent, and D could be a third thing or a fourth thing that's equivalent to the others. So you can establish multiple equivalence folders within the same path, but they all have to be equal to each other. Inside of the LMS, if we were looking at this is what it would sort of look like. You guys know that inside of the LMS, when you go to establish a path, there are 3 radio buttons. And the third radio button is use equivalence. These are toggles. So you can't choose any more than one of these choices. And once you've turned equivalence on, then it's on. And then equivalence is aligned with this folder mechanism. And you get into the folder tool by hovering over the plus sign, and you'll see a little folder icon. And I can demonstrate that, but I want to show a few more things first, and then we'll kind of go into the actual application in a minute. Once you have created a folder, that folder is given the option of turning equivalence on for it or not. Now, you could just have a random folder that just has other stuff in it, and it doesn't necessarily, it's not playing in the equivalence realm. But any folder that has equivalence aligned with it will be marked with a double asterisk like that. So that means that folder is an equivalence folder, and any other folder that has a similar designation will be equal to it. So this sort of maps the same premise that I was showing you in the slide, where I've got 2 requirements, 1 and 2, and then an option for A or B. That's what I'm showing here. 1 and 2, there's company policy and assess your knowledge, that's 1 and 2, and then an option for A or B. And when I open up folders A and B, it shows me that folder A includes the scheduled course, folder B includes the SCORM course. Another alternative here with equivalence is that each folder doesn't have to just have a single course that equals another single course in another folder. Any given folder can have multiple courses. So in this scenario that I'm demonstrating here, we have Course 1 and Course 2, those are the required ones that everybody has to do. And then you have a choice between Folder A and Folder B. Folder A includes that scheduled course, and it's going to be like an hour-and-a-half class or a 2-hour class, and we're going to be doing all kinds of things in that class, including we're going to be providing a tour of the internet, of the LMS. We're going to be providing some information. So the scheduled course is going to be like more in depth really than just the SCORM. And you can provide additional courses for Folder B, so that Folder B has 3 courses, which equals the scheduled course. That's kind of a great premise, right? And you could really put this to use. And what this does is gives your user some control over their journey, which is kind of nice. Sometimes you like to force an order. You can't really do that with equivalence. You can't force an order, but what you can do is provide these options. The next scenario, or the next advantage, I think, of equivalence that some of you have decided to use, some haven't, is along the lines, or kind of speaks to the KISS principle. KISS is keep it simple, stupid. It was coined, I believe, according to my great research capabilities, Kelly Johnson. Kelly Johnson was the lead engineer at the Lockheed Skunk Works, and they were responsible for the S-71 Blackbird spy planes, right? This was all about engineering and design principles, and it makes great sense for engineering and design, but I think many of us in the industry kind of follow the principle because it makes sense for almost everything. We found that most systems actually do work best when they're kept simple and uncomplicated, and that's the whole premise. So I thought that this would be a good lead in to some scenarios that I see some of our clients following, just in case I can catch some of you that like this idea. I want to see where it takes you. Some of you have scenarios like this, where you have a set of courses across different maybe user roles or different locations that are similar. For example, course A, B, and C, everybody's got to do them. Doesn't matter if you're a California attorney or a California staff member or somebody in Nevada, it doesn't matter. Everybody does A, B, and C. But only California attorneys do X, and only California staff do Y, and only Nevada people do Z. And it means that a lot of you are creating 3 different paths to accommodate these different people. Equivalence can help you with this scenario. So you would have a folder for California attorneys, equivalence folder, an equivalence folder for California staff, and another equivalence folder for Nevada. If that sounds like something that might work for you to simplify things for the purposes of simplifying those reports and streamlining your thinking and your management of all the paths, this might be a method for you. And this is an example of the scenario that I just showed you, where we have a California attorneys equivalence folder, we have a California staff equivalence folder, and a Nevada equivalence folder. And each one of those folders has all of the required courses that they need, the ones that they share, and the ones that are separate and different, separate and apart. So you can kind of see how that works. This is the way that path is going to present to the user, just FYI. So if you like this sort of KISS concept, then this could really save you guys a lot of time and energy and reporting, headache. All right, so here's my LMS. And obviously we start in the library. You need to set up your courses, get them all kind of ready. And then everybody knows to build a brand new path, you pop in to the second little button. And I am just going to name this my deep dive. And then I'm going to just do my description. So I have my path. Once you have a path, you go into your courses area. You see me circling there. to establish what courses live in this path. Then we have these 3 radio buttons right here. You can't choose 2 of them. They're radio buttons. So the only option that you can choose when you're going into equivalence is use equivalence. And then you click the plus sign, or you don't have to click the plus sign. You can hover over the plus sign to see that folder label. You can do it after the fact as well, if you want to. So let's start with the very first scenario that I had. Let's start with adding 3 courses, just 1, 2, and 3, no equivalence at all. So I'm going to add a course by clicking the very first plus sign. So there's my company policy. That's the first thing. And then the next thing is assess your knowledge. So those are the 2 things that are going to be required that aren't part of an equivalence necessarily. They're going to be required. And I know that they're required because that's the default, but also if I edit it, I can see, oh, it's required. Okay. Then I can start adding my folders. So if I hover over the plus sign, you'll see a folder icon appears. I'm going to hover again, just so you can see that. Boop. Mandatory for all. And apply it. I'm going to drag it up to the top here. And then I'm going to drag these guys into it. You see I'm kind of hovering and moving it off to the right. So now those guys live inside of mandatory for all. So those are the mandatory for alls. And then I'm going to add 2 equivalence folders. This is going to be folder A, and I mark it as equivalent. And I'm going to add a folder B. Folder B, whoops. And mark it as an equivalence. So you'll see the ones that are marked as equivalents have those 2 asterisks. This one doesn't have 2 asterisks. So A and B equal each other, and the mandatory for all doesn't equal anything. Everything within it, they're required courses, so they have to be done. So 1 and 2 have to be done, and then people can choose A or B. How do I add courses to A and B? Well, it's easy. You just click the little check mark next to the folder, and then you click the plus sign next up here at the top to add a course to it. And you could add a course just anywhere in here and drag it in, just like you saw me do for the mandatory one. So the scheduled course is, here's my first steps class. It's an SCH scheduled course. And that is the first requirement right there, first steps class. And it belongs to folder A. And you can see I can kind of contract and expand and contract, expand and collapse it like that. So folder B, what belongs to it? Well, I'm going to add the SCORM version of that topic. See if I can find it. So here is my SCORM version for that topic. And what I'm telling people here is that the class, going to the class, is just as good as running the SCORM course. When I save this, I can now use automatic assignment to assign this out just like I normally would, or I can just manually assign it to a person. I'm going to assign it to myself so I can show it to you. Here it is. Here's my deep dive path. And when I launch this, this is the way it appears to me. Mandatory for all. And I know that this means I need to click here and complete everything in this bucket. So I'm going to go in and complete those, and they'll get a little check mark. And then all that I have to do to get this path marked fully complete is to complete either A or B. You can play around with those labels however you wish. They're your labels. And it's important to note that you can put as many courses in folder A as you need, as long as anything that is in this equivalence folder equals any of the other equivalence folders that you've added.